Hi Storyworks readers, I'm Lauren Tarshis and I am so excited to be here today to take you behind the scenes of my newest article, The Shattered Land. It's the story of an incredibly powerful earthquake that shook southern Alaska back in March of 1964, ripping giant cracks in the earth, destroying buildings, homes, and bridges, and releasing enormous waves called tsunamis that drowned forests and devastated towns. To this day, the Great Alaska Earthquake is the strongest ever recorded in the US and the second most powerful in the world. I was inspired to create this article after writing about the Great Alaska Earthquake for my newest I Survive book. As always, I did an enormous amount of research. I read books, studied maps, and combed through magazines from the time of the quake. But to really understand what it must have been like for the people in the middle of that earthquake, I wanted to travel to the place where it happened. This is how I was going to really get the information to bring that story to life for you. So, back in May, I flew from my home on the East Coast all the way to Anchorage, the largest city in Alaska. Ever since I was your age, I've wanted to visit the faraway, frozen land of Alaska. And now finally, here I was. At the Anchorage Museum, I learned about the land's long and fascinating history. Alaska was actually the first place where humans set foot in all of North America. That was more than 15,000 years ago during the last ice age. Today, many of the descendants of those first peoples still live in Alaska. There are more than 140,000 Alaska natives in the state, members of 11 distinct cultures, each with their own traditions. But although people have been living in Alaska for thousands of years, less than 1% of the land today is occupied by humans. The rest is beautiful wilderness. As I drove away from Anchorage, I stared in awe at the wonders all around me. Mountains so tall they looked like they were painted onto the sky. Wide, rushing rivers, crashing waterfalls, and an enormous moose nibbling grass by the side of the road. At one point, I spotted what looked like a tall frozen river, a glacier I knew, one of many in Alaska. These icy sheets once covered much of North America. Finally, I arrived in the small city of Valdez. Early on in my I Survive research, I knew that this would be where I wanted to focus my story. In the late 1800s, thousands of people passed through Valdez on their way to hunt for gold farther north in Alaska. Some of those gold seekers stayed behind. And over time, they built houses, schools, churches, and shops. By the 1960s, Valdez had become known as a beautiful, vibrant small town. But it had a deadly secret. The ground beneath all those homes and shops was made up of tiny bits of smashed up rock mixed with water. It seemed solid enough. No one gave it a thought. Until March 27, 1964, when the earthquake struck. The shaking from the earthquake caused that ground-up rock to turn to mush. That's why, just seconds after the earthquake began, the town's waterfront with docks and warehouses collapsed into the sea. 32 people died in Valdez, more than in any other part of Alaska. After the disaster, experts realized that Valdez was still in danger. The unstable ground underneath the town could crumble away if there was another earthquake, this time taking the whole town with it. So town leaders made the difficult decision to move the town 4 miles away up the coast to a spot where the ground was more solid. Within 3 years, a new Valdez was born. I learned all about this in the books and articles that I read, but I really wanted to go there to see everything for myself. I wanted to talk to people who were there. And I was in luck. Valdez has an incredible museum, the Valdez Museum and Historical Archive. 2 historians there, Karen Oberg and Faith Ravel, generously offered to be my guides.
Right now we're on Alaska Avenue. That's the main thoroughfare that would have...
Together, we visited the site of Old Valdez. There's almost nothing left. Some rotten wooden stumps, a rusted forklift. Looking around at Valdez Harbor, I could almost feel the ground quaking beneath me. See the earth splitting open, hear the shouts of terror. I felt a deep ache in my chest, thinking of what happened here 60 years ago. Now it was time to talk to people who experienced the earthquake firsthand. And luckily for me, Faith and Karen were able to connect me to survivors of the earthquake, people who still lived in Valdez. One of them is a retired Valdez teacher named Dorothy Moore. Dorothy was a 19-year-old college student at the time of the earthquake. She and her family were sitting down to dinner when the shaking started, and it didn't stop.
All of a sudden, things began to shake, and I can remember my little brother was on a high chair, and it was bouncing around, and he got scared.
But Dorothy doesn't dwell on the terror of that day. In the years since, she has made it her mission to learn everything she can about earthquake science and teach others how to be prepared for the next disaster.
You need to be prepared, but not be frightened. You can get through it.
I also talked to Tom Gilson, who was around your age, 13 years old, in 1964. Tom was hanging out with his friends near the waterfront when the earthquake struck.
The ground was breaking all around, and there was big snow piles piled up, and I just had this sense of that everything was closing in, and I said, we're trapped.
Tom says the fear of those moments will never leave him. But looking back, he is also reminded of the power of human resilience.
Well, one of the beauties, I guess, you can learn from a story like this is humans can go through a lot, and they can survive.
I knew I wanted to share Tom's incredible story in a narrative nonfiction article for Storyworks. I came away from my time in Alaska bursting with new knowledge about the history of the state, the beauty of that land, the science of earthquakes, and the destructive power of that huge quake in 1964. As you read, try to figure out the details that I found when I was on my trip. I worked hard to turn all these details into a story that would leap off the page and unfold like a movie in your mind. So how did I do? I hope you're going to write to me and let me know. And I also hope that I'm going to see you again on our next adventure together.